Today's scripture reading is from John 4, verse 1 through 30. Jesus goes to Galilee. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went again into Galilee. And he had passed through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. The woman of Samaria. There came a woman of Samaria to drink water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' and you would have asked him, and he would have given to you living water." She said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you, who gave us the well and drank of it himself and his sons and his cattle?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst. But the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I will not be thirsty nor come all the way here to draw." He said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have correctly said, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you have now is not your husband. This you have said truly." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When the one comes, he will declare all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." At this point, his disciples came, and they were amazed that he had been speaking with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or why do you speak with her?" So the woman left her water pot and went into the city and said to the men, "Come, see a man who told me all the things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is it?" Then they went out of the city and were coming to him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thanks, Gene. As we dive deeper into this Advent season, we dive deeper into the fact that God is Immanuel, God with us, and with it, this question. Gotta go through. Went too far. What does it mean, right? Like, what does it mean in my life that Christmas is all about the fact that God is Jesus, in Jesus is God with us? Like, what difference does it make? We've been looking at this question through and through, right? And last week we dove deeper into Jesus being God, right? And then the question for that week became, is Jesus to me really God or something else? Right? Is God practically and realistically God to me? Because if he was, then not giving God the kind of respect and trust and allegiance that we would, right, as the master of life, the same respect that we usually give to, like Usain Bolt we looked at, Yo-Yo Ma, Adele in their respective fields, simply doesn't make sense, right? It just doesn't. And more importantly, if God is for real God, not just some fake God, but actually God, it means that this God is more powerful, more unpredictable, and more crazy than the craziest storms the disciples had ever seen. Right? We looked at Mark 4, which means then that Jesus and God, therefore, isn't someone who is fixing the boat or fixing the storm, someone who we need to get us out of our trouble. God becomes then someone who is in the boat with us, which changes, well, everything for that fact. So then the question today, dealing with the with portion of God with us, is this. What happens when our understanding, our relationship with God goes from like, yeah, God, he's really strong, he's really powerful, he's really wise, he's pretty great, I think, to God, that's my guy. He's always with me through thick and thin, and I can't imagine my life without him. And you know the difference between the two, don't you? It's going from I know God to I'm with God and he's with me. It's going from experiencing God to meeting God. It's going to a concert to experience BTS to I got a VIP backstage pass to eat, talk, and hang out with BTS. Or best, I have a friend from high school. She's actually a marketing executive for Atlantic Records, and she's head of marketing for Missy Elliott and is responsible for the artist Lizzo. I don't know if you know her, but she was recently featured in Variety magazine. That's her picture up there. I got her permission to do so. Her name is Grace Kim James, and she was recently featured as one of the hit makers of 2019 because she's responsible for breaking Lizzo out. And if you see in the picture, Lizzo is right there in the middle, and then there's a little bit of thing. That's from her Instagram. She is with Lizzo. I may know Lizzo, but she is with Lizzo. And actually, Grace was in Houston not too long ago, and because Lizzo was in Houston doing like this TV thing. And so Grace and I were hanging out at my house. She hit me up and she was like, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. Let's get together. And so we were hanging out and had to give her a ride back to the hotel. And on the way back, she's getting text messages. Her phone is blowing up. And essentially, she's talking with her, Lizzo's PR person, and Lizzo in a three-way group chat. And the question is, where do you want to eat? Because apparently Lizzo was really hungry. And so she gets on the phone and she's like, man, Lizzo wants to go eat pizza again? Like, I'm not down for that. I want something healthy. That's what Grace does. Clearly, she's not just knowing Lizzo, she is with Lizzo. It's going from, ooh, I got a picture and a hug from Lizzo to, girl, what do you want to eat? Because I'm hungry and I don't want pizza. There's a difference between the two. So Advent tells us that we can go from experiencing God, like we would Lizzo or whatever, to meeting God, as my friend Grace does all the time with Lizzo and Missy Elliott. And the question is that the way that we know God? Is that the way that we are with God? Because you know there's a difference between the two. And so the question then for us today is two questions. First, what's the difference between meeting and experiencing God? Like, how can we tell the difference? What's the difference between I'm meeting with God to I'm experiencing God? And the second question is, how then do we actually meet him? How does this happen? Is there a way we can consistently meet God rather than just experiencing him? Because I think for most of us, we do the latter. We experience God a lot, maybe. But meeting with God is something that maybe we haven't done or maybe don't do very often. And the story, I think, that tells us best how we do this is a story that Gene read for us just a minute ago. And we're going to answer these questions, but kind of in reverse order. The second one, how do we meet God? And then the first one, and to do so, we're going to set it up in these 3 points. First, the setup, right? How do we meet God? So Jesus tells us in the story that Gene read for us, right, that Jesus and his disciples had to go from Judea to Galilee. There's the map right there. Judea is way down here, and then Galilee's way up here. And then you notice in the middle, there's this little thing called Samaria. The green arrow is how Jesus actually gets there. It's a long and common journey that Jews make all the time because they go from Judea to Galilee all the time. But rather than go straight, which is what you see in the arrow, it's really hard to see, but there's this gray arrow right here. That's the way that people normally go. They go around Samaria because unfortunately for Jews, the straight route meant that you had to go through Samaria, and that's a no-no for Jews. And without going into specifics, you can just think of it like Jews and Nazis back in the day, that they don't mix. Black and whites during the civil rights movements, they don't mix. Japanese and Koreans during the imperialism, they don't mix. No Jew in their right mind would actually go and make this route. But in verse 4, it says that Jesus had to go through Samaria. The word had is the Greek word day. It's not on there, right? But John uses very often. And every single time you use it, it's pointing to a thing that God has to do. But then it makes you wonder, like, why? Why does Jesus have to go through Samaria when most people don't? Well, verse 23 and 34, Gene didn't read the 34, but they tell us. Verse 23 says this, but an hour is coming and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people, the Father seeks to be his worshiper. And then verse 34. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. The point is this, God the Father is seeking people, and he is seeking them by sending Jesus. The whole Advent story that we're going to be going through and that we have been going through is all about a God who's in hot pursuit of you, to draw you and I and people like us to himself. That God becomes a human being so that he can pursue us and seek us, even if he has to go through the most enemy of territories to do so. So that means then Christmas means that God, the storm shusher and the sit-downer, sends Jesus on a mission to seek people to become his people, to become with him. And if that's settling in, it should make you feel some sort of way, I think. That God would want you and sends Jesus for you. But I hope that this feeling that you're getting isn't making you feel like kind of mushy inside. At least not primarily, right? This idea that, oh my goodness, Jesus loves me so much, right? Which he does, by the way. But because if this is the thing that you know about Jesus, then we will learn this a little bit later. It will automatically, inevitably, at some point along the line, you will be disappointed. Because at some point you will feel with what's happening in your life that God is no longer pursuing you. When things are good, then you'll be like, yeah, God is pursuing me and he wants me and he's following me, doing all these things. And then things will happen in your life and you'll automatically assume that God doesn't want you anymore. He's no longer pursuing you, right? It's the classic, guy is all over the, chasing after a girl and he goes all out. He's romantic. He buys her flowers, chocolates, takes her to nice places. Everything is all set up, everything that, the romantic kind of movies tell you. And then the moment the girl says yes or they get married, everything stops. They're a slob. They don't call, they don't text, they don't take you out to fancy dinners. They expect everything. This kind of classic story, right? No longer pursuing. I hope that's not happening in some of the relationships you're living in, right? But when things like that happen, you automatically assume with the guy and also then with God that he's no longer pursuing you. But we've learned that that's not true. Because God turns his face away from Jesus so he doesn't have to turn his face away from us. God is always for us and always seeking us to be his people. So then the point of all of this that I'm telling you is that what you have to notice is that God is the one who initiates everything. He sets everything up. It's why he had to go through Samaria. Remember a few weeks ago when I said to you that Jesus comes to us as a baby to make himself completely withable? Right? Jesus having to go through Samaria is becoming the withable God. Check this out. In verse 6, it says, then Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. The word wearied describes someone who is completely exhausted from working out all day in the sun. And now you might be saying, okay, Pastor P, big whoop, what is the point, right? First, let's not overlook the fact that Jesus gets tired. The word of God, who was there in the beginning, who created all things with his word, that Jesus gets tired. The one who says to the violent storm, shh, sit down, gets tired. It's kind of nuts to think about if you just kind of put it in your mind, right? But more, this Jesus, right, is exhausted and thirsty. And you might be going okay, Pastor Pete, what is the point? You're beating a dead horse. If Jesus doesn't get thirsty and or tired, how do you think that Jesus is going to initiate this conversation with this woman at the well? Do you think he's going to approach her and be like, hey, how you doing? Let me talk to you for a second. That's not happening in those days, right? If Jesus shows up all Jesus-like kind of knight in shining armor kind of a thing and says to this poor woman who's outcasted, right? And says, yeah, I got living water for you. You want to take it? Do you think this lady is saying yes? No. If you went to the well and you were trying and you were this kind of beaten down woman, and we'll see a little bit more on why, and all of a sudden this random man who comes to you kind of I remember, the image to me is like Gaston in the Beauty and the Beast. I know I'm dating myself with old Disney movies, but if someone like that came up to you, I don't think you would say yes. You would say no, because it sounds very creepy, and you'd be like, ooh, what do you want? And you'd probably run away. But more importantly, culturally, she would have never said anything like that because one, Jesus is a man, and she already has enough man troubles, let me just tell you, and you'll find out a little bit more. But also, he's a Jew, again, a no-no. And so if Jesus is ever going to be God with her, this woman, then he has to somehow become withable, and that's exactly what he does. He's exhausted, tired, thirsty, barely staying up next to this well, sitting there, and exhausted and tired, he goes to her, woman, please, lady, please give me a drink. The scene is of an upstanding Jewish man who happens to be in this town of Sychar in Samaria, who asks a down in the dumps woman a favor, and it changes her life. If you want Jesus to become with you, you have to recognize he's becoming withable to you. And the question is, are you willing to engage a withable God? He does all the things to make himself presentable to you so that you can engage. Are you willing to engage? The next thing, then the meetup. Go and get, I say. The stage is now set, okay? This woman is willing to engage rather than run. And now it's time to do what is necessary to move this woman and us from the experiencing God to the meeting God. And to do so, Jesus begins to break her walls down. I've been saying it the entire time. This interaction that Jesus is trying to have this woman is really tricky. There's a lot of things going on that needs to be handled very quickly. And the woman points it out from the jump. She says, verse 9, how is it that you, being a Jew, asked me for a drink since I am a Samaritan woman? You see all the issues right there. The woman knows there's a whole bunch of stuff that they have to get through if this is ever going to happen in the way that it needs to, okay? So here are the walls that Jesus needs to break down that the woman clearly understands. The first one is the racial wall. Not only do Jews and Samaritans hate each other, getting a drink from the woman meant that Jesus' Jewish lips had to touch a cup that the woman's Samaritan lips had touched. And this is not like a weird version of cooties that you might be thinking of. That's not what I'm trying to get at. The point that a Jewish person of any gender would get a drink from a Samaritan person is really, really bad. It's ritualistically unclean. You would get rid of all of your Jewish standing, all that stuff. It's a big, big deal. So Jesus deliberately, by asking for water, is saying, I'm gonna break this first racial wall. Then the second wall that gotta be broken, the gender wall. You may know how strict the gender rules are. We've talked about it a bunch of times in different sermons in here, right? Especially with Jews. Imagine what they're like when a Jew man is dealing with a Samaritan woman. Let's quickly take a look at some of the things that they believed back in the day. They believed a holy and righteous man was to never greet a woman in public. Jesus broke that one already. A man wasn't to talk to a woman in the street, even his own wife, and definitely not another woman. Jesus clearly broke that one too. And then a common prayer that people prayed back in the day was this. Literally, men prayed this. Oh Lord, I thank thee that thou hast not made me a Gentile or a sinner or a tax collector or a woman. I know, it's really terrible, but that's how they felt. So the woman's gotta be shocked, you think, right? What is this man doing? That's why she's like, how are you, this Jewish man, asking me, Samaritan woman, for water? Like, what are you doing? But the more and more I think about it, more than shock, I think for the first time maybe this woman feels like someone treated her like a regular human being and not like the down in the dumps person that she feels all the time. And it makes sense because Jesus all the way throughout scripture is always treating women like equal first-class human beings, which most people in those times didn't do. So that's the second wall. Then the third wall, the fear, pain, and shame wall, the most important one of all. Now, if you read the story, right at this point, kind of as they're going, the woman, she's ready to take what Jesus is offering. She's interested in this living water. She wants to pick up what Jesus is putting down. And she's like, wait, you're gonna offer me water when you drink, I don't ever get thirsty, and therefore I don't ever have to come back to this stupid well ever again? She's like, yeah, I'm down for this. I think this man is cool. Like, he's doing things that no other man does, and he seems like a good, upstanding person. Like, I'm down. And she's like, yeah, go ahead and give me this water. So the conversation is going as well as anyone could have expected. A Jewish man and a Samaritan woman at this well having this conversation. She's about ready to kind of accept what Jesus is offering. And then right then and there, Jesus goes for the jugular and says, go and call your husband and come here. Now, I'm not exactly sure how this happened, like in terms of the way the conversation go, but I imagine that the response from the woman came immediately. Like when Jesus goes, go call your husband and come here, she goes, I don't have one. And she's like, bingo. And he goes, that's right, actually. Because you've had five, and the one that you're with right now isn't actually your husband. Now, we have yet to mention some of the details that's going on that Jesus knows. But there's a reason why this woman is at the well to give Jesus water. There's a reason why she's the only one there to be able to offer Jesus water in the first place. It's the 6th hour, the hottest part of the day. that all the other women would avoid because it's absolutely too hot. First of all, you don't want to walk like the mile. You have to get there from the main city, main town part of the town. And then by the time you go back, half the water's probably evaporated because it's that hot in the Middle East in the dead heat of summer. But more than all of that, can you imagine anyone somehow having 5 husbands and then a 6th one that isn't married to you but that you're with? Can you, my dad has had 3 wives. But take that up 2 more and then add another one. It's just kind of bonkers. How old is this woman? First of all, how long are these relationships like? What is this? What's going on? But no matter the reason as to why she has 5 and then a 6th, I think we can all agree it's just rough, isn't it? Can you imagine how rough it must be for her to be in that place? And all these marriages happen in the same city, in the same people, so everybody knows all of this. She hasn't moved, right? And so you look at the reasons and you realize she's either been widowed 5 times, which means all 5 of her former husbands died somehow, or she's been divorced 5 times, or some combination of the both. But I think we can all agree that none of it is very good. But if you ask and if you read kind of the really smart people who study this, I think most people agree that she's probably been divorced 5 times. Because back in those days, men could divorce their wives pretty much with any reason at all, just whatever they wanted. They had free reign. But because we know that she's had 5 husbands and then now has a 6th, I think we can eliminate this idea that maybe in the church for a long time, that she's somehow this really unfaithful, cheating kind of woman. No, I don't think that's going on. Because if a woman cheats on her husband, there are severe consequences. And also, whether she got stoned or not, depending on the place that she's in, I don't think any real man would actually, who has a head on his shoulders, would actually marry a woman who's known to be a serial cheat. You wouldn't marry this person. She would have gone into being a prostitute and you would have probably just left her there, but you would never marry a woman, which means that she never did anything wrong. It's just that these men no longer wanted her and they kicked her to the curb and said, I don't want you anymore, get lost. And then someone else picked her up. Sorry for the language, but that's just the way I think it went. Her name, her presence, her identity screams, I'm not worth it and I'm so divorceable. Talk about down in the dumps, unwanted and outcasted. It's not a surprise that she's at the well at this hour. I think for her, being alone and miserably hot is better than being with other people, which is more miserable. Because you get everyone's scorn and judgment the entire time. And so if you're seeing the situation, right? She comes to the well and she's like, this is another crappy day. She's coming to the well and she's doing all these things. And then this Jewish man offers her living water and she's like, oh my goodness, that sounds too good to be true, but I'll take it. And all of a sudden, right when everything seems to be going well, Jesus very purposely touches her biggest pain point and her wall. And the thing we got to ask is why, right? Jesus, why go and ruin it? Things were going so well, bro. Why go and ruin it? Why activate her greatest pain, her greatest shame, and her greatest fear? Why play the husband card? She wanted the living water. She wanted to drink the living water. Why didn't you just go and keep going with it and say, here, let me give you the living water? It makes me want to ask, isn't there another way? There's got to be another way. You're Jesus. You're smarter than this. You've got to have figured out a different way to go about it, I think. But the answer to that is simply no. And the answer to the reason why Jesus touches her greatest pain point right at the time when she seems to be all in, I think answers the question, how do we meet God rather than experience God? It's kind of like, let's say you're at a retreat, if you're a youth student or you're at a revival or something, one of these services, right? And you've had doubts about Jesus the entire time, and all of a sudden you get there and you're hearing, and the worship was great, and you're like, oh man, I'm blessed, and you're feeling all this goodness, and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to take that jump and make that jump and have Jesus, and you do the whole yeah, I'm ready to follow Jesus, kind of that whole thing, and everyone gets real excited. Right at that moment, because I know somehow, I go, yeah, but before you do, and then I touch the greatest and biggest and most deeply reclused secret and shame of your life. How would you feel? You'd probably run, wouldn't you? You'd be like, I'm out. I didn't sign up for this. I was ready to give my life to Jesus, and then you do this to me? No, I'm out. Peace. So why does Jesus do it? And how does this get us from going from experiencing God to meeting God? And I think the answer is you have to let Jesus remove the walls that you've put up. All of them. Because any walls or barriers you have won't let you meet God. Pretend like this. Maybe this will help. Let's say, out of the blue somehow, you get an email or a text, and just pretend it's not fraudulent, it's not some spam, it's like real, and you can kind of authenticate it. I don't know, maybe it's like the person's real Twitter account or whatever. And they message you, DM, direct message you, and says, hey, let's grab a coffee or whatever. It's your greatest hero, the CEO of a company, whatever. Pick a person, whoever you want to meet that you think is gonna change your life. And you set a date. It's Thursday, whatever, at 3 p.m., whatever, it's on the calendar. How do you get ready for this? It's like asking a bride, how do you get ready for your wedding day, right? Or a groom, how do you get ready for your wedding day? You get a fresh cut, definitely new clothes, new kicks, all that kind of stuff. Right before you're getting all ready, you're looking in the mirror, giving yourself a pep talk, and be like, okay, I can do this. You can do this, Pete. You got this. You can nail it. Like, don't worry about it. If it happens in the movies, like sometimes it's like you walk into a restaurant and then I don't know, name a celebrity, right? It's just sitting right there and you're like, oh my goodness. So you go to the bathroom, you go and you wash your face, you're like, I got this, let's go. Give me, buy whatever, let's get it. You prepare. You go to the nines. You do everything that you can to give yourself the best chance to present the best version of you, don't you? Right? Are we all agree? You wouldn't just go rolling out of bed. That you wouldn't set the meeting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, so you get up at 6:45, roll out of bed, put on some sweats, with whatever your janky socks, and then you go. You don't do that. You set it up so that you have clear all day to get ready, and you do that so you can present the most desirable, attractive, worthy, hireable, lovable, whatever-able version you can think of. That's what you want to do, don't you? Why? Because you want to present the best version so that you don't present the unpolished, the unremarkable version of you, don't you? Because you know in your heart that if you do, they will never go for that. You'll immediately get rejected, dumped, or whatever the thing that's supposed to happen. You'll never get what you want. You'll get the opposite. And let's say you go to this meeting and you do the nines and you get everything and then they say yes. If it's the boy or the girl of your dreams and you get a date or whatever, then the next one, right, if you keep going on, then how do you prepare for the very subsequent meetings that you have with these people? You do it the same, if not more. You get more dressed up. You get more into it. You do more to present more of your things. If you're in working, you get your resume and you do it all up. You keep going and going and going. You put your best forward. But do you know why you do that? We all will do this without even thinking about it. As long as you and I feel and sense that the other person could potentially, just maybe, leave you if they found you to not be likable or if they found something or someone better. Don't you know that? It's all over once they find a better version. It's all over once they find someone taller or smarter or better looking or more accomplished or funnier, more charming, whatever more you have, they'll get instantly, it's over. It's a crude joke to lighten up the mood, but it's why often couples will not fart in front of each other until they're married. Right? You got to fart and you're like, oh shoot, you go to the bathroom. Don't come down, no. And then you fart back and you're like, oh, okay, I'm back. Why? Because you think maybe if I fart in front of my spouse or my wife or my husband and it's really, really bad, then they're going to leave. They're going to think I'm disgusting. Don't laugh. You know you're thinking it. Because after that, it's all too late. Sadly to say, it's oftentimes, if you look at marriages, I apologize, but a lot of the times it's the Christian men who gain the most weight after they get married because they get comfortable. I don't got to try no more. Why? Because my wife ain't going to divorce me. She loves God and she can't divorce me. She said yes, so I'm good. Isn't this why the woman who 1 moment earlier was so eager for the water that will never make her thirst again or have to come all the way here to draw in an instant is ready to shut it all down? Go and call your husband. I don't have one. In her mind, this is what she's thinking. Oh, no. Oh, shoot. He knows. Crap, he knows. Of course he knows. Everybody knows. How foolish of me to think that he thought I was worth it. It's the same old pity crap that I get every single day. Oh, no, it's over. Dumb. How could you believe? I think if we're being honest, people, I think more than God not meeting us, we're keeping him away. I think we hold God at a distance, not allowing him to truly meet us because we fear that when he does, he won't like what he sees and he will not stay. That his promises aren't actually true for the worst and wretched version of you. Isn't this the reason why many of us, when we're not doing well and our faith isn't great, you run away and not to? It's the only time it happens. If you're feeling sick, then where do you go? You run to the doctor. But when you're feeling not well spiritually, you run away from God. Why? It's because we keep that because we're not satisfied and we don't want him to see this version. That's why a lot of times college kids who do really well, like high school kids do really well here, and they go off to college and all of a sudden have a really bad semester. They're not going to church and not doing all these things. I've heard from many of them, they'll come back to this place. They're great. Everybody knows their name. They should be comfortable here. Like everybody's so happy to see them. They'll get a hug or whatever. But then they've told me after that, and like when I see them in the class, they're like, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, they're back and they're kind of like, they have this like weird like, posture and like, what's wrong with you? And then they'll tell me later, it just felt really awkward because I just had a really bad semester. I didn't know if I belonged. And they're like, what? I've known you for 7 years. We approach God, we approach our faith with this belief that it's our goodness, our desirableness, our faithfulness is the reason why God loves us and pursues us and meets with us. It's oftentimes why in our prayers we tell God that we love him more than just admit that he loves us. It's our way of saying, I love you, God, I love you, God, I love you, God, right? That's why you love me. So we come to God with parts of our life open. But the greatest wall is built way up because no way God is going to know my fear or my shame or my worries or my pains. And if he does, there's no way he's going to love me. Love this? No way. This is why there's no other way with this woman. Jesus has to go there. Because right before she asks her, or Jesus asks her to go get her husband, she's feeling confident, she's feeling loved, cared, cherished, validated, and worthy. I mean, a Jewish man going out of his way, breaking all sorts of boundaries to ask me for water and then offer me living water at that fact. See, if Jesus doesn't break her greatest wall and she takes the living water, whatever that looks like, and then she goes home, inevitably, she will believe this. She'll believe, oh, he only loves me and cares for me because he doesn't actually know me, the real me. He wouldn't dare love me if he knew who I really was. Because that's how everyone else is treated up to this point. So Jesus must erase all doubt. He must expose the truth and show the woman it's not about what she does or what her past says or what her village says about her, but it's about Jesus' hot pursuit and desire for her. He sets it all up. He becomes withable. He had to go through Samaria. All she has to do is let him into the worst and most painful places, and so must we. Jesus has to erase all of your doubt, or you will never fully trust that God loves you and that his promises are actually true. That's why the first beatitude is poor in spirit. When the kingdom breaks in, you'll first realize how not perfect we are. How not loving, how not patient, how not secure, how not that great we are. And then Jesus will say, good. It's you who don't have much, who will indeed trust me enough to go where I want to take you, to do what I want to do in you, to be with me in the world that I desire to be with. And so the question is, will you let Jesus break your greatest wall to meet with you? Because if you don't, you won't meet with him because you won't let him. So then, the follow-up. Come and see. What's amazing to me about the story is that the woman doesn't run, but stays and engages with Jesus. And then two really amazing things happen. And through it, we answer the other question. What is the difference between experiencing and meeting God? The first thing that happens is in verse 26, after a fascinating theological discussion about, where they worship and true worshipers and all that kind of stuff, right? She goes, I know that a Messiah is coming, the Christ, he's the one, and when everything happens, he's gonna be it. And then he says, I who speak to you am he. The am he in Greek is ego eimi, which is the Greek translation of when God says to Moses, I am. Tell him that I am sent you. That's God's name, his divine name, the way he wants to be known. So Jesus to her explains, I'm God right here. I imagine he whispers it to her. She's like, I know the one who's coming, the Messiah. And he goes, the one who speaks to you, he, ego, emi. And she's like, that Jesus reveals her his true identity. If you look at John 3, Nicodemus, who's a Jewish leader, he comes to Jesus in the middle of the night looking to find life, and he doesn't say a thing. He walks away, ashamed, because he doesn't get it. But to her, I'm he, ego, emi. And then in verse 28, the woman left her water pot, went into the city and said to the men, come and see a man who told me all the things that I've done. This is not the Christ, is it? The water pot is the thing she came to the well to fill up with water so she can take it back to her house. But she leaves it, either because, in my opinion, she doesn't need it anymore, or she fully intends on coming back, which obviously she does. But I think the point of this verse and the reason why John adds it in there is that she doesn't really need the water pot anymore. That's not her life. That's not her thing. The thing she wants and needs and has is Jesus. Which is why then she goes right back into the city, makes that mile-long journey most likely, right back into the city where all the men are. It's kind of like, imagine like a restaurant or a bar or whatever where all the men are kind of having lunch, kind of that idea. She goes right into that place, most likely at least one of her 5 previous husbands is there, smack in the middle of that place. And she goes into that place and declares, you gotta come and see this man. Come and see this man, quick. Let's go, hurry up, let's go. Put your drinks down, put your food down, let's go. We gotta go and see this man. He's told me everything that I've ever done in my life, and he somehow still loves me. You ain't never seen anything like him. You gotta go. We gotta go now. Come on, let's go. I point out these 2 things because when we are meeting with God, he becomes the most important thing in our lives. The central and foundational thing, and you cannot wait to tell anyone and everyone about him. We can't help ourselves. We're so excited. He blows up your social media feed. He blows up everything you got. He's all over the place because you've never, ever experienced anything like it. All of your fears, they go away. All of your hurts, they go away. Did you notice she doesn't go to the women, but she goes to the men? See, I would have expected her to go to the women and be like, hey, ladies, you got to see this man. He's unlike any other man I've ever met. I know. I've had a bunch of them, but he's not like any one of them. But no. She skips all that and goes straight to the man who's caused all of her issues and says, you have to see this man. He will change your life. All doubt and all fear is gone. She's no longer hiding, no longer cowering from the pain the men have caused her because she has met God. And when you meet the person who heals you from your greatest pain, who loves you through your greatest shame, you cannot help but to share to the world a person you had never, ever, ever seen the likes of. And then here's the thing you cannot miss for all of you, especially the young ones or the people who don't think you have much to offer in this place or whatever you are, however you're feeling, don't miss this. She uses her own life story to bring people to Jesus. Did you catch that? Because she said, come and see a man who knows everything about me. Yeah, I've been divorced 5 times. I've been kicked to the curb a bunch of times, more pain than you'll ever know in your entire life. But he knows this, and he knows me, and he loves me. And then the people there, they believe. And then other people who don't believe because they didn't hear, go to Jesus, and then they believe because of Jesus. Jesus uses her wretched and broken life to save the foreign people that aren't supposed to know him. When you meet God, he does crazy things. Especially in the most wretched and down and out people. She leads men to Jesus. I mean, isn't this what Advent is all about, really? Us meeting with God and not being able to help ourselves and saying, you have to meet him too. What wall are you not allowing Jesus to break? That's the question for me. What wall are you not willing to let him break? Because he's willing and he's God. Did you ever think that maybe Jesus leads the disciples into the sea, as we saw last week, into the craziest storm, knowing it's gonna storm, to reveal to them at their absolute worst, deathly afraid, accusative, rude, selfish, all of it. And in that greatest moment of their fear and their worst shame, he shows them, I am God and I'm in the boat. Why are you afraid? So ARCHE family, this Advent season, will you let God meet with you? Will you let him break down the greatest wall? If you think you're unattractive or ugly or not all that great, all the ladies in here or whatever, will you let him tell you that you are beautiful because you're made in his image? If you think you're not that smart, not that accomplished, there's so many people smarter than you, doing better than you in school, who's gonna go to better schools or whatever that is, will you let him tell you, I will make you whatever it is that I want to, you ain't got a thing to worry about. If you have a terrible past, broken past like mine, bunch of divorces, bunch of family things, and you feel like you're not worth anything, you're not gonna make of anything, you're just gonna repeat all the same mistakes your parents ever made, will you let him tell you, I will make you a son of God, and I will do wonders in and through your life, if you let me. So this week, as you recognize that God is the power, the most unpredictable thing you've ever seen, then will you let him break down the walls so that he can come and be with you? Maybe this is the best way as I lead us into a time of prayer. Maybe you've seen a movie like this where it's a classic I know, you know, I love romantic movies. I'm a sucker for them. But especially the Korean ones, is super melodramatic. There's always a girl who like knows that the guy loves her or whatever, but then she like does something and then she just like, she's in pain and she's crying and she's ashamed, and then the guy wants to come and like hug her and love her. You know what does the girl do? Every single time, no. She runs because she can't handle the fact that some guy who actually says that he loves her would actually love her through this. It's what we do to God all the time. And he says, until you let me in, I cannot meet with you because you're not letting me. So will you? Will you let the God who becomes a baby to become withable, who walks all the way to the well and becomes tired so he can ask you for a drink, or whatever your situation is, will you let him meet with you? Will you let him break the wall? It might hurt, probably will hurt, but it's worth it. So in this moment, I give you a moment before the praise team comes up and leads us in worship. Whatever that wall is, and you know it better than anyone. I know you know it. Don't pretend. Don't front. And Jesus saying, I'm right here. And let him meet you. Let him break the wall and tell you that he loves you. That none of your hurts and pains and shames is big enough, wrong enough, messed up enough for him to not love you. Because he died for your sin so that you can live forever. Can we pray? Can you go to God, respond, and then the praise team will sing us out in a time of response.